What does the concept of separate legal personality mean when it comes to company law or the law of business association? In the course of this video, I would want you to really appreciate this concept so that you better apply it as you go about answering a legal question as far as the law of business association is concerned. Now, as you can see on your screen, the principle of separate legal personality means that a company is a legal person with separate existence from its members, in the sense that once a company has been incorporated, it becomes an artificial person separate from its own members. Now, this principle, of course, in law comes out under the case of Salomon versus A Salomon, which I've summarized on your screen, as you can see. And maybe to give you a brief overview here, Salomon transferred his bootmaking business, initially which was, he was operating this as a sole proprietorship, and he transferred that business to a newly incorporated company, which was called Salomon Limited. And of course, he was one of the key persons steering this company, and the other members consisted part of his family. Now, remember now, Solomon has transferred his business to a company. A company is an artificial person, meaning that as he transfers this business, he expects to be paid. Who is paying him? It will be the incorporated company that has been created. So, facts of these cases, of course, proceed to demonstrate that payment for the transfer was made through shares and debentures. And then, of course, this was secured by a floating charge over the company's assets, meaning that in the near future, in the event that Salomon required to be paid, or if something went wrong, he would be considered first priority to be paid. And this, of course, aligns with when you look at liquidation, there is priority of payment. We have secured creditors, we have unsecured creditors. So a floating charge meant that Salomon will be considered first. And as you can see on your screen, I've elaborated a clear meaning of what a floating charge is, so that you sort of get a contextualized understanding of how it works. But ideally, there are different types of charges. We have a fixed charge, we have a floating charge, and that is a conversation that, of course, I'll be elaborating on in more videos to come. But in this particular one, of course, I want you to just understand that when it came for payment, for the transfer that Salomon had made to the company, which is a separate individual, he was to be paid through shares and debentures. And of course, he also had secured a floating charge over the company's assets. Now, later on, when the company failed, of course, when a company fails completely, there are different processes that are put in place to salvage and sort of make sure that the creditors are able to get back their money. In this particular instance, the company failed to the extent of liquidation. And liquidation means the deathbed of a company, meaning that, of course, as you wind up this company that has come to an end, people have to be paid back. So there is a priority of payment. Because Salomon had a floating charge, his claim against the company was secured, and he was ranked ahead of unsecured creditors. You see? But again, taking it to the principle, remember, after he transferred his business to the company, his mode of payment was through shares and debentures, and he had a floating charge over the assets of the company. And when that company failed, he was first priority during liquidation to be paid, and the unsecured creditors, of course, rank lower in that hierarchy. And I'll be explaining what really that means in more videos to come. So the argument that came out of this case was that the liquidator argued that the company was a sham, and it was, of course, just an agent of Salomon that he was using, of course, to derive these benefits. Because you would think of a situation, why would someone create a company in this one of the members, the company fails, and then automatically is the one to be paid first? So that was the argument coming out. So the argument is this company is being created probably as a sham, and this man still wants to rank ahead of us. And yet initially, he owned the business that he had transferred to the company. So I hope you're starting to form a mental picture around this case. But ideally, as you're going to see in the course of this video, when it came to the ruling, the House of Lords ruling, this is where now the concept of separate legal personality was solidified. And the argument that came out here, the reasoning, of course, the reasoning that came out here was that since the company was duly incorporated, remember once a company is incorporated, is an artificial person. It's a separate legal personality. So in this particular instance, it was an independent person with rights and liabilities of its own. I hope you're getting me up to here. And then, of course, the House of Lords ruling further emphasized that the motives of those who created this company were irrelevant. So when Salomon was creating Salomon Limited, his motive is irrelevant because upon incorporation, that particular company became an independent person. And that meant that it has its own rights and liabilities in its own name, separate from Salomon. And as such, this ruling firmly established, of course, this legal fiction that we call the corporate veil. And of course, ideally, what I want you to get here is that a company once incorporated, it becomes an artificial person that has its own rights, just like a natural person. And of course, when again you go further to appreciate this case, it brings out the legal implications that set out the doctrine of separate legal personality. What does this mean? When we say a company has separate legal personality, that would mean that automatically it has its own rights and obligations. It means that a company will end up having its own liabilities that are also distinct from the shareholders. And of course, to a certain extent, it is sort of just like a natural person. You and me have our own rights in the context of Kenya. And when you incorporate a company, that company too as an artificial person has its own rights. The other key thing that of course comes out here that you need to appreciate is that this right of a company once incorporated places it on the same basis just like a natural person to own property, to execute contracts. A company can sign contracts in its own name. It can go and raise debt, It can make investment just like you, a natural person. And of course, it will also assume rights and obligations in its own name, independently of its own shareholders. Let me give you an example. Imagine a company like Safaricom. Safaricom is a name. It's independent from its shareholders. Safaricom can own property. It can sue and be sued in its own name. It can make its own investment because it's an artificial person. And that is how you better appreciate the concept of separate legal personality. And then, of course, you can even go to court tomorrow and institute a legal suit against a company, for example, like maybe a newspaper company like Standard or Daily Nation. And you'll be instituting that legal suit in the name of that company. And shareholders will have nothing to do with that because you're dealing with an artificial person who has his own rights and obligations. And the other key implication of this doctrine of separate legal personality is that the company survives the death of its members. You think about it for a moment. There are so many people that have been shareholders in different companies. They die and the company continues operating for hundreds of years and so many years to come. So it never stops. And that is, of course, what I've just explained is a consequence of separate legal personality. Now, I want you to appreciate again this concept a bit further. When we say a company is an artificial person, separate legal personality, at the end of the day, you need to remember that there have to be human beings that are the mind of this company, people who are going to now come in to run the company. Now, once incorporated as an artificial person, this particular company cannot act on its own. So we need human beings who are going to come in to manage that company. We'll have directors of that company. We'll have members of the board of that company. But that doesn't take away the fact that the company has its own rights and obligations. And so when you look at the case that I've provided on the screen, the principle that comes out here, which is of course a nuance from what I've just explained, much as the company is its own person, it's an abstract concept. At the end of the day, we need people to manage this company. So a corporation is an abstraction with no mind. That company has no mind of its own or body of its own. Its active and directing will must be sought in human beings or a person. Someone has to come and direct that company. We need to find directors, who will become the mind of that company, who will, of course, exercise their will to ensure that that company continues operating. So also remember that much as we say that a company is a separate legal personality, it's an artificial person, it has its rights, it can be sued. At the end of the day, when you look at different companies in Kenya, like EABL, Safaricom, Daily Nation, they have human beings that are managing the operations of that artificial person. And they have directors, and they have the CEO, the management, of course, including the CEO. They have the board, the non-executive directors. These are now, what they're doing is that they're coming in so that they're the mind behind the operation of this company. But also not forgetting, it is a separate legal personality. So the key takeaway from this explanation today is for you to appreciate that while a company is legally separate, its actions are still carried out through human agents identified as its directing mind. And those are the directors and the management. So this is the concept I wanted you to appreciate today. And in more videos to come, I would want to cement and build onto this so that you better understand company law. And also simply also appreciate when we say law of business association, these are just business association, and a company is just being one of these associations. And of course, there are also specific functions that come or advantages that come by incorporating a company vis-a-vis just having a partnership. Thank you for, of course, engaging. If you like this video, share it with your friend. Subscribe to Nairobi Legal Insights, and see you next time.